Okay, let's get into it. Today, we're doing a deep dive into an issue it's just one of the most painful and complex topics in modern East Asia.
It really is.
The abduction of Japanese citizens by North Korea. And you have to understand, this isn't just history. It's a wound that is still very much open.
Absolutely. When we talk about this, we're looking at state-sponsored kidnappings that mostly happened between the 1970s and the 1980s.
Right.
The Japanese government has an official list, 17 people, across 12 separate incidents. But here's the key thing. North Korea admitted to abducting 13 of them.
Admitted it. And in 2002, 5 of those people were allowed to return to Japan.
Exactly. But that's where the progress, sort of stopped.
Because the status of the other 12 is where you hit this huge diplomatic wall. North Korea's official line is just immovable. They claim 8 of them died.
Right, 8 died, and the other 4, they say, never even entered the country.
And we should be clear, beyond those official 17 victims, there are hundreds more. They're called specific missing persons. And the suspicion of abduction in those cases is extremely high.
It is. So I think our goal today is to really get into the mechanics of it. Why did North Korea do this? How did they pull it off? And why has a resolution been so difficult to find?
Let's start right there with the motive. Why would a country resort to something like this? It seems like such a high-risk tactic.
Well, it really boils down to 2 things. Espionage and a serious lack of internal capabilities in Pyongyang at the time.
Okay.
From the 1960s onward, they were ramping up their intelligence operations, especially against South Korea.
Yeah.
And to do that, they desperately needed Japanese identities.
Passports,
exactly. So their agents could slip into South Korea or operate anywhere else in the world without being detected. Identity theft was a huge part of it.
And what was the second piece?
The second was knowledge transfer. They needed Japanese nationals. They needed teachers to train their spies.
To teach them the language, the customs.
Everything. How to act Japanese, how to sound Japanese. They needed to make their agents completely believable.
It's just so chillingly strategic. I was reading about this supposed order from Kim Jong-il around 1977.
Oh, the Magjabi order.
Yeah, Magjabi, which means something like kitchen kidnapping, just grab foreigners.
If that directive is true, it was a total game changer. It suggests the abductions went from these targeted operations to something much broader, a national project.
But even if it seemed random, the victims often had very specific skills, right?
They did. You see this clustering of professions among the missing people. Printers, doctors, nurses, mechanical engineers.
So they were stealing technical expertise, skills that North Korea was lacking.
Right, it wasn't just about language. And the methods they used were, they were sophisticated and frankly terrifying. You can break them down into 3 main types.
Okay.
The most common one involves secret landings on Japan's coastlines. Mostly the Sea of Japan, because of Hokuriku, Tottori, and then down in southern Kyushu, like Kagoshima and Miyazaki.
And this is where we get those infamous date night abductions. Young couples just snatched from the shore.
Precisely. Agents would land secretly, grab whoever was nearby, and drag them onto a waiting boat. It was brutal and efficient.
So what was the second method? That one involved collaborators inside Japan, right?
Yes, the use of toteisen. These were local Japanese residents who were, either radicalized, blackmailed, or just paid to help North Korean agents.
And they would lure people.
Yeah, they'd lure targets with fake job offers or some kind of business deal, and then just hand them over. It shows a scary level of infiltration.
And the third method was, just cleaning up mistakes.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
If agents were doing something else, some other espionage, and a local accidentally saw them, they'd just grab the witness to silence them.
And this was all coordinated through those numbers broadcasts, right? Like the A3 broadcast.
Straight out of a Cold War movie, but it was real. Encrypted commands sent over the radio.
Let's talk about the victims. The timeline really puts a human face on this. The first officially confirmed case was the Usetsu incident.
Right. September 19th, 1977. A man named Yutaka Kume, he was 52, disappeared from the Usetsu coast in Ishikawa.
But the case that I think everyone knows, the one that really brought this home for so many people, happened just a couple of months later.
Yokota Megumi.
Yeah.
November 15th, 1977. She was just 13 years old, abducted in Niigata City while she was walking home from badminton practice.
A middle school kid, it's just, the fact that they target a child like that, it's unbelievable.
And that made the crime resonate on a whole new level. Then the next year, 1978, was just a horrific year for this.
So many cases, like Yaeko Taguchi, who was 22. She disappeared around June of 78.
And her case later became huge internationally. She was identified as the woman known as Ri Eun-hee. the Japanese tutor for Kim Hyon-hui.
The agent who bombed Korean Air Flight 808.
The very one. That created a direct, undeniable link between the abductions and North Korean state terrorism.
And then came that string of abductions on the coast, one after another.
July 7th and 8th in Fukui, a young couple, Yasushi Shimura and Fuki Hamamoto, both 23.
The agent responsible was supposedly Sim Gwang-soo.
That's the intelligence, yes. Then just weeks later, July 31st, two more young people, Kaoru Hasuike and Yukiko Okudo in Niigata.
And then in August
12th, Hitomi Soga, who was 19, and her mother, Miyoshi Soga, who was 46, taken together while they were out shopping. It's staggering how many people vanished from that small stretch of coast in just a few months.
It really is. It shows how bold they were getting. So,
Wow.
what was life like for them in North Korea? Where were they even kept?
It's hard to even imagine. They were held in facilities called shutejo,
Which means something like invitation centers.
or guest houses, yeah, a chilling name. They were basically secure compounds, heavily monitored. And while they were prisoners, returnees have described it as a kind of privileged confinement.
Privilege how? Like they got better food than the average person.
Exactly. Kaoru Suike testified that they had catered meals, they weren't starving, they were even taken on sightseeing trips sometimes or shown movies.
But they were completely isolated.
Completely. Hitomi Soga said they had zero contact with ordinary North Korean citizens. So it wasn't about physical hardship as much as it was about total psychological control.
They were valuable assets. They needed to be kept healthy enough to do their job, which was training spies.
That's the long and short of it. Okay, so let's shift to the Japanese response. For years, nothing really happened publicly.
It was very quiet. When did the government first even admit that this might be North Korea?
It took a surprisingly long time. The first official government acknowledgement was on March 26, 1988.
So, a decade later.
A decade later, the chairman of the National Public Safety Commission, a man named Shiroku Kajiyama, said there was a strong suspicion of abduction by North Korea.
But even then, that wasn't a huge story, was it?
No, it was barely a blip. The real change, what forced it into the national spotlight, was the families.
Right.
In 1997, they formed the Family Association, Kazokukai, and they made the incredibly brave decision to go public with the names and photos of their loved ones. Yokota Megumi's face was suddenly everywhere.
And that just changed everything. It went from being this vague government suspicion to a real human tragedy that you couldn't ignore.
And that pressure campaign worked. It led directly to the biggest breakthrough in this entire saga.
Prime Minister Koizumi's visit to Pyongyang.
September 17, 2002. Koizumi sits down with Kim Jong-il and Kimming. Well, he admits it.
He just admits it.
For the first time, yes. He acknowledged they abducted 13 Japanese people, and he gave a formal apology. He blamed it on, a few individuals and special institutions, and said they'd all been punished.
An incredible admission, and the result was that 5 survivors got to come home.
Correct. On October 15th, 2002, the Chimuras, the Hasuiks, and Hitomi Soga landed in Japan for what was supposed to be a temporary return.
And that's where the diplomatic games really started. North Korea expected them to go back.
They absolutely did, but the Japanese public, the families, the government, they all said, no way, they are staying.
Which created a huge crisis. The 5 returnees themselves refused to go back. Pyongyang was furious, accused Japan of breaking a promise.
And it poisoned the well for negotiations for years. But Koizumi did go back a second time in May 2004.
Right, and he managed to get the children of the Hasuik and Shimura couples out.
He did. So that brought some families back together, but the fate of the remaining 12 was still a total mystery.
And this is where any shred of trust that might have existed just completely evaporated.
This is the moment. North Korea, sticking to its story that 8 of the victims had died, tried to offer proof for Yokota Megumi.
You're talking about the fake remains issue, the Nice Ikatsu Monday.
Exactly. In November 2004, they handed over what they claimed were her cremated remains. Case closed, right? But Japan ran DNA tests.
And the results were shocking.
It wasn't her. The DNA belonged to a completely different person.
Unbelievable.
Not only that, but later, in working-level talks, the North Koreans admitted that the documents they provided, the death certificate, everything, were fakes. They were fabricated.
That one act, providing fake bones and forged documents, it changed Japan's entire position, didn't it?
It had to. From that moment on, Japan's stance became, we can't trust a single thing you say. Therefore, we have to operate on the premise that every single victim is still alive.
And that's still the official position today.
That's the line. There was a little glimmer of hope in 2014 with the Stockholm Agreement.
Right. North Korea agreed to reinvestigate all Japanese nationals, set up a special committee.
And Japan agreed to lift some of its sanctions. It looked like progress.
For a minute.
For about a year and a half. Then on February 12, 2016, North Korea just slammed the door shut. Abruptly announced they were ending the investigation and dissolving the committee.
And that's where we are today. 12 of the 17 certified victims are still missing. Japan maintains its policy of dialogue and pressure, and normalization is off the table until this is resolved.
And it's so important to remember the only reason we're even talking about this, the only reason there's international pressure, is because of the decades of advocacy from the families. They're the ones who drag this out of the shadows.
They really are. You know, thinking back to that critical moment in 2002 when the 5 survivors came home, the whole thing was framed as a temporary return. It makes you wonder, if we look back at that decision, what if Japan had just refused that language? What if they had drawn a harder line right then and there?
That is the essential question, isn't it? When those 5 returned, there was a real fear inside the government and among the families that by agreeing to temporary return, Japan was letting Pyongyang control a narrative, letting them declare the problem solved.
So the question is, if Japan had refused, if they demanded immediate, permanent, unconditional repatriation for those 5, even if it meant the deal might collapse.
Exactly. Would that have led to the last 20 years of deadlock? Or could it have maybe forced a more definitive, comprehensive resolution for everyone much earlier? It's a heavy, heavy calculation that I think still hangs over every single strategic discussion today.